Coming up next on Living on the Edge with Chip Ingram.
Real deep love can only happen when that other person knows I'm in this and I'm in it for good. I'm in it when it's good, I'm in it when it's bad. I'm in it, are you ready for this? In sickness or in health. Welcome to Living on the Edge. My name is Chip Ingram, and we're in a series called Experiencing God's Dream for Your Marriage. Now, let me just say something. Most marriages don't work anymore. Just this morning, I got on a website, and I was looking at research done by Rutgers University about all the things that are happening in marriages. And you know what? The news isn't very good. Most marriages do not work anymore. But today, we're going to talk about how yours can be the exception. This is one of the most practical teachings of anything in this series. You're not going to want to miss it. Your marriage can change for the better, but it probably won't. That woke you up, didn't it? And it probably won't. Not because God doesn't have a great plan, not because there's not power, not because you know enough right now to begin to put some things into practice that would cause a revolution. It won't because we have a faulty view of how life change occurs. The average person thinks that listening to truth brings about life change. I've had the privilege of sharing God's Word with you. I got news for you. You can listen until the cows come in. It brings no change whatsoever. In fact, even agreeing with the truth brings no change. You can sit around in small groups and sip coffee or Cokes and say, I really agree. That is God's design, and we do have those barriers. And honey, didn't you think that's our problem? Oh, I do think that's our problem. And you know what? You can do that, and 6 weeks from now, you'll still have the same problem. Hearing God's truth doesn't bring change. Agreeing with God's truth doesn't bring change. Even agreeing that you need to change in what you've heard doesn't bring change. Only one thing brings change: acting on the truth. When Jesus was preaching in John chapter 8 to a group of Jews, he says that to those Jews who had believed on him, to those who abide in his word, it's a key word, abide, taking in the truth to put it into practice. He says to them, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The fact is, most of us have learned unconsciously to traffic in truth. If I know it, if I agree with it, if I understand it, we get this small delusion into thinking, well, change is going to occur. I want you to know no change occurs until you put the truth into practice. And that's what we're going to do. This is going to be one of those, it is going to be so practical, it's going to hurt. Okay? I want to get to the practical, everyday. What would it look like on Monday? What's it going to look like next weekend? How are we going to do this together? Because my experience is that's what you're going to need if real change is going to occur. I put together what I call the parable of the car to kind of give you an idea of how this is going to work and why it's so important. So this is a word picture, okay? I'm trying to get into your head. I'm trying to sneak around the corner to get you to really put some things into practice that you now know up here. But I just know like 3 days from now, your life's going to be busy. A week from now, things are really moving and hopping. I want to figure a way, if I can, to help you see how the change will occur and then give you some very practical steps. And as you move along this path together, then you'll realize, this is going to bring about some conflict. And so in our next session, we'll talk about how to resolve conflict or how to fight fair in marriage. Okay, here's my hypothetical. When you make hypothetical stories, right, they're hypothetical, so I can say whatever I want, and you have to believe me. Okay, so this isn't true, and I'm making it up, but since I'm making it up, I can say whatever I want. Okay, I want you to pretend that you have a nephew. And he has been with your dear beloved brother in the Amazon with his mom and dad, translating the Bible in the thicket of jungles. And he probably speaks 2 or 3 tribal languages. He's never been to America. He's learned some things. He doesn't have a computer. His first exposure to Western civilization is they realize that at about 20, he probably needs to go to college and get an education. And he's very mature in many ways. He's a spiritual young man. He's a godly young man. But he gets off the plane and he goes, that big silver thing flew. This is wild. And I mean, he sees buildings and everything is brand new to him. Now, he's heard about him. He's seen some pictures, but he's never been here. And so you're thinking to yourself, you better keep him kind of close. Why don't we have him go to a community college, get him a good education, and, we'll have him live here with us because my brother, he ends up in one of those wild dorms. We'll keep him at the house. And so you think to yourself, I do not want to get up every day and drive this kid to the community college. And so you buy a pretty inexpensive secondhand car, and you go out into a very big parking lot, and you begin to teach him to drive. Okay? And so, you teach him the basics, and he's pretty athletic, and so he picks it up pretty quickly, scares you a little bit, and you show him how the car works. You kind of get him moving a little bit. He learns just enough, goes down there. He's a bright kid, passes his license, and you do it once or twice together, and then pretty soon you say, okay, great. The fall semester starts. He gets in the car. He goes, and everything's great for 2 weeks. And then the other thing you informed him of is these magical little boxes that you can open up called cell phones. And he carries one now, and it buzzes, and he opens it, and he can talk to you anytime. In fact, he calls you at very odd times. And so now you get a call in the middle of a business meeting, or maybe you're home, doing some things around the house, and he says, Uncle or Aunt, the car you gave me doesn't work anymore. And he tells you vaguely where he is, and you go down, and you drive down, and he's right, it doesn't work. And you think to yourself, now what's wrong with this thing? I had it all checked out by a mechanic, and we got a problem here. Well, what you find out is it's out of gas. And you say to him, well, why didn't you put any gas in the car? He says, what's gas? Oh, I know I should have told him about that. So you realize, okay, so he needs some fuel. So you take him in, you get the gas, and you show him that every so often, and here's the dial. I really should have said something about, but he learns now. And now for 2, 3, 4 months, things are going great. And then you get another phone call. And this time he says, hey, this car is making very, very funny smells, and it's very hot, and there's smoke coming out of it. I don't know what's wrong. And you say to him, well, when's the last time you changed the oil? And he says, what's the oil? And then you realize, oh, brother, maintenance, I kind of skipped that one too. And you realize that hot moving parts need oil to keep things going in a good direction. So you show him about that and how to change the oil, and you go through that, and everything's fine. And, pretty soon, his first year is just about over, and, he's got about 13, 14 months, and then he calls you, and he says, and you hear this noise. What's that? He says, I don't know, this car's not working right. It's making a really funny noise. It scares me. And you say, well, when's the last time you got it tuned up? And he says, what's a tune-up? And you realize, are you getting the picture here? And so he takes it in and realizes you got to tune it up and take care of things. And then finally, he has your confidence. And he's been there about 18 months. He's a good young man, and he's met this beautiful young woman, but, she's in another city about 7 hours drive. And so he goes 7 hours away, and the highways, that says I-75 and I-40 and I this, and he just thinks, I don't know what all these numbers mean, but he gets there with someone else, and then on the way back, he gets on an I-75 going the wrong direction, and he lands somewhere about 300 or 400 miles away from where he's supposed to and doesn't know how to get home, and you get another call. And you say to him, it wasn't that expensive a car, but did you plug in on the navigational system how to get home? He goes, what's the navigational system? And you go, oh, brother, here's the little parable. You can have skill, and you can know some basics, but in marriage, it's not about just getting started. Fuel of commitment. There's going to be times in your marriage that things heat up, and so what you better find is you better learn the oil of communication. And then every marriage, I don't care how good it is, and you can set goals and work at things, there's times where you got to stop your marriage and get the marriage car off the road and get it into the shop and get some time away from everybody and have some nice walks and some good talks and some good food and reassess where you've been, and you got to tune up your marriage. And if you don't do that on a regular basis, guess what? The same thing that happens to a marriage happens just like with a car. And finally, you can be going in a marriage and be working and get so close to everything, you never ask yourself, what direction are we going as a couple? It gets so focused on just us and our fulfillment, and if you have kids, our kids, and what are we doing here and there. And so all of a sudden you drift as a couple and you wake up 10, 20, 25 years and you realize that you never thought through. There was no navigational system about what's the mission, what's our co-mission from God, why are we here? And what I want to give to you in just very, very practical ways with tools is to how to keep fuel of commitment in your marriage, how to oil it on a regular basis, how and why to take a tune-up, and then finally, how to lock in a navigational system that will set your car in alignment with what God wants to do. Does that make sense? Most marriages do not work. This is how to make yours the exception. Most cars don't run forever. But people who do these 4 things with their cars, they last a very, very long time. And so first I want to talk about the fuel of commitment. The fuel of commitment. And the definition is a lifelong choice of unconditional love to an imperfect person. And circle the word choice. The fuel, this is what keeps your marriage going. It's not your feelings. That's what you're being told. Your feelings come, your feelings go. The fuel of commitment is a lifelong choice. When you feel like it, when you don't feel like it, not to a wonderful, I love them all the time, they come through for me person, but to an imperfect person. Remember I said earlier, love is giving to another person what they need the most when they deserve it the least at great personal cost. And if there's one thing I want you to get about the fuel of commitment, so many people give up on their marriage because they get love and infatuation confused. Love has nothing to do with feelings. Love is about choices. Can I give you a biblical illustration? Final night on the earth, Jesus, he's in the garden. Does Jesus love you? Yes or no? Yes. Did Jesus feel like going to the cross to pay the penalty for your sin? Yes or no? No. In fact, so much so that here he is on his knees and he's praying and he's realizing not simply that they're going to stick thorns in his head, not simply that he's going to be drugged through half naked, that he's going to be humiliated by the people that he made and created and loved, but there's going to become a time where there's going to be a separation from the Father, a cosmic division that has never occurred in all eternity as he would become your sin substitute. And it's so intense that he's praying and he's sweating like great drops of blood. And what does he pray? Father, if there's a plan B that we haven't thought of in the Godhead, let's go with that one. Isn't that really what he prayed? I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it, but nevertheless, not my will but yours. That's what it requires for the fuel of marriage. Love is a commitment that you make. The mandate is Matthew 19, 3 through 8. If you read it, you find that classic passage that most of you heard where Jesus is asked about divorce and remarriage, and he says, what God has brought together, let not anyone pull apart or pull asunder. I remember when I got married to Teresa and thought about the gravity of the commitment, I thought I needed a word picture. And we would go visit her folks, and they live, way in the hills of West Virginia. And in the hills of West Virginia, you can walk out of their house, and it just kind of goes straight up, and it's rock. And then it goes hills like this. And they had a little house that had a spring. And what they often do is they would dig out the hill, and so you have a spring, and it's cool. And then they build a little house into the mountain, so it's all rock, except for this door, and then they would keep all kind of canned goods. I thought if there was ever like a big war, this would be a great place to be. Plenty of food and rock all around you. And I remember thinking about, because everyone gets afraid, I think, when you're getting ready to get married, and little cold feet, and thought about, do I really love her? Not how do I feel. Do I love her to the point that no matter what? And I remember this little word picture came to my mind. And just as I was praying, I think the Spirit brought it to my mind. I pictured Teresa and I walking into this little spring house that's, maybe 10 by 10. And there's water, and there's enough food forever. Kind of been nice if there was an exercise bike, but didn't have that. And I pictured Teresa and I walking in hand, and then when someone shutting the door behind us. And then in my early years as I was coaching and teaching, during the summers, I worked with a bricklayer. And so we did haydite block, and we did fireplaces and brick. And so I had the picture of my bricklayer taking not one layer, not two layers, but 3 layers of haydite block. And so it's all rock here, and there's 3 layers of haydite concrete block there. And you know what? We can get mad at each other. I can go to this corner, you can go to this corner, and there's plenty to drink, and there's food. But there ain't no way out. And I'm telling you, the word divorce has never been used in our home. I have a friend who actually took a dictionary and cut it out of the dictionary, because the moment there is an option, how you process your problems changes 100%. Love is a choice. You know what? I'm ashamed to admit this, but I'll admit it. Have there been times that our marriage has been so difficult, so painful, so frustrating? If I could just get out legally before God, would I? Absolutely. That's how big our problems were. There's times I felt so angry and so frustrated, and like no amount of work can ever fix this. But I chose to stay in my marriage. And now, almost 30 years, 4 kids, and blessings later, man, I'm glad I did. Because most of us bail out of a very hard situation, and we think it's going to get better, and it doesn't. The greatest thing you can ever do, you know, God wants to change your life through this process, and what you have signed up, you signed up for the spiritual NFL. And I've never seen an NFL, running back come through the line, gain about 5 yards, get smashed, and then get up and go, boy, that hurt. How come you hit me? That wasn't very nice. If you want to gain yards in the NFL, you get your head knocked off when you come across the middle as a receiver, and linebackers take big shots when you come through the line. But there's not a lot of people that are running backs in the NFL who are accomplishing what they are. And this is a lot more than being a running back in football. This is about getting some of the most precious experiences and quality of life with another person. But I want to tell you, the fuel of commitment begins with a lifelong choice. And it says the rationale is you can write the word to love. Why do you do it? It's to love. And then next to that, just write this little phrase, I'm committed to you. By the way, that's the seed, that's the soil, that's the environment in which real love grows. See, I'm not going to let you see who I am, as insecure as I am, unless I know that you're not going to bail out on me. People hold back for fear that, if I get vulnerable, they're going to see how ugly and terrible and struggles I have. And real deep love can only happen when that other person knows I'm in this, and I'm in it for good. I'm in it when it's good, I'm in it when it's bad. I'm in it, are you ready for this? In sickness or in health, in happiness or in sorrow, till death do us part. Do I understand that there are a couple biblical situations where someone can throw dynamite or TNT or nitroglycerin and blow up a marriage that you don't have any control of, that they just walk out on you and get involved with someone else? I understand. But in about 98% of the cases, that's not the case, is it? How do you do that? You make a weekly choice to say, I love you. Remember that little care list that you made? Where your mate wrote down for you, this is how I feel loved, and you'll notice in the very back I have some questions. But, it's an amazing thing. Every day, choose. And especially try and do something you don't feel like. Every day, try and do something you don't feel like doing that communicates to your mate that you love them. And you know what? It's an amazing thing. Just like habits are built, your love can be like a muscle that gets strengthened. And little by little by little by little, you can become the kind of person that someone else is living with. Wow, I knew you were tired, and I knew you didn't really feel like doing that, and yet you love me in this way. You know what that does? That causes a response, and that causes something very exciting to happen. Now, you don't do it. Now, by the way, love means if nothing comes back, that's okay, because you didn't do it for them, you did it for God. But boy, as you do that, you'll see great things happen. A weekly choice to say, I love you. Our model is Jesus. You might jot in the corner of your notes, Hebrews 13:5. I will never, ever leave you or forsake you. Jesus has told me, Chip, good days, bad days, hard days, terrible days, when you mess up, when you think terrible thoughts, when you've done things that make me ashamed of you as my son after I've died for you, Chip, I will never, ever leave you or forsake you. And if he's going to do that for me, what's he want me to do? He wants my mate to know, I will never, ever leave you or forsake you. That's the fuel, and that's commitment. The oil of communication is a lifelong skill of learning to understand each other. I mean, we spent a whole session on communication. But notice it's a lifelong skill. You just don't get it and then you have it for good, of learning to understand each other. The mandate is Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, 15 and 16. But speaking the truth to one another, we're to grow up in what? All aspects into him who is the head, even Christ. And it goes on to say, by that which every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body to the building up of itself in love. And so, when parts start moving, you make progress, they overheat, and you need some oil in the relationship, and communication does that. And the rationale is to know. You want to communicate. Loving says, I'm committed to you. Communication says, I want to know you. I want to know all about you. I want to be a student of you. I want to learn your likes and dislikes. I want to be close to you, so I need to know who you are. And when you know them, then that little phrase you learn is, I trust you. That's what you communicate when you communicate. You know, when you say, I really want to get to know you, if that choice says I love you, this says I trust you. I trust you. Well, why do you say that? Because I'm going to progressively take the zipper of my heart of who I really am, and I'm going to keep lowering it. And I'm going to take my heart with vulnerable stuff that if you wanted to, man, you could hurt me very badly. You do understand the people that can love you the most can wound you the most deeply. And so it takes trust. And so what you do is little by little, you kind of put your heart out on that platter. These are my fears. These are my dreams. These are my struggles. And how you handle those will tell me how I'm going to respond to you next time. And of course, the how there is we went over at a weekly conference. And the way we did it, don't make this like such a big deal, but often, I had 4 kids, so it's not, and I pastored a church that ended up, growing to a very large size, so there were lots of pools. But we ate dinner at a certain time, we structured it in, and after dinner, our kids knew, we were going to make a pot of coffee, and you know what, kids, you got homework, go do whatever you want. Sometimes it was 15 minutes, sometimes it was 45, but we sat at the table, and hey, how'd your day go? Kind of what's going on with you? And we stopped and communicated, and 2 of those nights, and it just got perfunctory. Teresa, what are you concerned about? And then she would tell me, so what are you concerned about? What do you dream? What do I dream? What are you willing to do? And we did that to the point where I will tell you, we don't use those questions anymore. We just share unconsciously when we get together what we're concerned about. And now that our kids are grown, we find ourselves eating dinner and there's no kids to shoo away. Hey, you want to run out and get a cup of coffee? Yeah, let's go. You would laugh at what we think is romantic at times. There's a little fast food place with no scenery, and we find ourselves with a broken Chick-fil-A sandwich between us and sitting in a car talking about life and God and one another, looking into the beautiful oversight to the back of a Home Depot. I mean, it just really, But you know what it is? It's just taking a little window to say, I want to be with you and I trust you. And our model is Jeremiah 33:3. This is how God feels about you. Call to me, and I will tell you great and mighty things that you don't know. No, I want to commune. I want to relate. Please speak to me. And if you'll speak to me, if you'll open up the lines of communication, I want to show you things beyond what you'd ever dream. And so he models for us the kind of relationship. And for those of you that have gone through a tough time, and those of you that feel like you've been wounded and you really can't get this deeply in communication, I have a wild illustration I want to share. You can follow along if you want. It's in Isaiah 43. God's people have turned against him. God's people, they're worshiping idols. They won't give him the time of day. And in Isaiah chapter 43, he talks about in verse 21, the people who I formed for myself will declare my praise. Yet, he said, I thought that's what was supposed to be. And then verse 22, yet you've not called on me, O Jacob. You've become weary of me, O Israel. You haven't brought me the sheep of your burnt offering, no worship, no sacrifice. You haven't honored me with your sacrifices. I have not burdened you with offerings. I wasn't after your money. Neither have you filled me with the fat of your sacrifices. Rather, you've burdened me with your sins, and you have wearied me with your iniquities. Some of you feel like that. I mean, don't like look at your mate and go, yeah, that's how I feel. Don't do that right now. But do some of you feel like, I'm just tired. I'm just weary of all the junk I've put up this long in this relationship. We all get there sometimes, right? As we close today's program, this is one of those times that I wish God would do a miracle. And I could be about 1 million people, and I could have a cup of coffee, and I could meet with each one of you individually. And I like to just sit at your kitchen table in your living room, and you get a cup and I get a cup, and we really talk about, boy, what's this mean to you in your marriage? Here's what I know. I know a huge percentage of people that are watching and listening right now is you don't feel very in love. Your relationship is not in a good place. You're discouraged. The sizzle has gone away. And you want to recapture it, but you keep waiting for those feelings. And some of you have private thoughts. I've met with a number of men that, in a discipleship group, and everyone thinks they're so spiritual and holy, and they've got this role in the church. But boy, I get alone, and they say, I've been married 26 years, and I'll be honest with you, the kids are gone, the career's this way. We got nothing anymore. I mean, there's nothing in the relationship. And a lot of it is after you hear all those songs and watch all those movies and you see people in love, and you walk or go to the mall and you see people that are touching one another and they're romantic. And if you're living in a situation where that stuff's not happening for you, little by little people begin to drift, and then people you never dreamed, people like you, find themselves thinking thoughts that lead toward this marriage falling apart. And I remember a story that really helped me, because what we learned today was love is a commitment. Love is not how I feel. Jesus did not feel like going to the cross. Jesus chose to go because he cared about you and he cared about me. And I remember reading a true account of a fellow who decided privately that they were going to go on vacation, and he decided kind of just for the heck of it. We go to this beach house, my wife wants to take walks, I don't want to take walks, she wants to do this, she wants to do that. For 3 days, I'm going to do things exactly the way she wants them to. And she always, makes me crazy because she's late. I'm not going to say anything. And so for like 3 days, this guy chooses to act. And he doesn't get the newspaper out. He takes walks on the beach. He takes her out to dinner. He's patient with her. And it's a great story at the end. She goes, Charles. He goes, what's wrong, honey? Well, Charles, is there something I need to know? She goes, no, honey, I don't get it. What do you mean? Well, Charles, you've treated me so good for 3 days. We've taken walks and all the things I like to do. Charles, is there something I need to know? Do I have cancer? Am I going to die? And he laughed. He said, no, honey, I was doing a little experiment, and I decided to just choose to treat you how I believe God wanted me to treat you, even though I didn't feel that way. And here's what happens. When you make that commitment, you make that choice, you ask for God's power, those feelings that you long for, they'll come back. You bail out, I guarantee you'll regret it. Love is a choice. Love your mate.